Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. It's Friday. We are lucky. Matt Continetti is in the house. Matt, of course, is a columnist for the Free Press, for the Washington Free Beacon, for Commentary Magazine. He's head of domestic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, and usually a welcome commentator on Commentary Magazine, except for his rant today. His closing rant on today's podcast was basically an attack on Lester Bangs, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman in Almost Famous, when he went after pop music critics. Did you think of Lester when you had that in mind, Matt?
I had Lester in the back of my mind, Hugh, because I enjoyed Almost Famous, but at the front of my mind were the critics who disparaged and mocked Billy Joel during his heyday in the late 70s, early 80s. And I was reminded of this by watching And So It Goes, the very good Billy Joel documentary on HBO right now. And it just occurred to me that there are all types of critics. Movie critics I like, literary critics I like classical music critics, but rock critics, I just don't understand what they're up to. I really don't.
Oh, I thought Cameron Crowe had them nailed. And by the way, when I thought back to that movie while I was listening to your rant, thinking, no, he's right about everyone who worked at the Rolling Stone, but I like Cameron Crowe and I like Philip Seymour Hoffman playing Lester Bangs. So that footnote. Now we turn to the serious stuff. First, a big question. Do you know? I know that Israel puts a huge premium on hostages, and more than probably any other country in the world. Was that developed, that part of the elder wisdom, the Talmud, whatever it is that guides the sages, did that develop in the diaspora or did that develop in ancient Israel?
Oh, I think it goes back to ancient Israel. I think it's a long-standing Jewish principle that you ransom the captives, so you try to get them back. And it's informed the modern state of Israel since its foundation in 1948. And we've reached a point now, though, where there are very polarizing and serious debates in Israel over whether the type of limited war and stop-and-start conflict that's been going on in Gaza is justified to make all efforts to save the lives of the remaining 20 living hostages. Because, of course, you may get some of the hostages out. You'll never get all of them out because Hamas knows that that last hostage will be its last chance at survival. While you may get some of the hostages out, you're also, in effect, trading the lives of young Israeli soldiers for them. It's a terrible dilemma Israel finds itself in as it launches this operation.
The premium on
Gaza
hostages,
City.
Matt, seems to me not made for the modern world, where an Israeli can be seized in Uganda, they can be seized anywhere in Europe, they can be seized in America. And if Israel keeps to that which gets rewarded gets repeated, every radical will try and grab an Israeli because they'll realize the price that Israelis will pay. Is it really possible to maintain this attitude towards hostages?
I think it's almost impossible to maintain if Hamas is allowed to remain in power. Because if Hamas is allowed to remain in power in the Gaza Strip, then it and every other terrorist group, Hugh, will know that you can take the hostages. You can cause complete devastation in most of the territory you control. But at the end of the day, the price of getting that hostage returned to Israel will be the price Israel will pay is that you will survive as a terrorist group. And so this is why I think it's very important that Israel uses this opportunity, this next phase of the war, to defeat Hamas, even if that does put the lives of some of the remaining hostages at risk. I know it's very easy for me to say that, living in Washington, D.C., not part of Israel, but I think that is the stakes here. And Israeli public opinion is divided. There are about 50% who think that you need to go in and defeat Hamas, and then there are about 50% who think that if only Hamas will come to an agreement and trade the hostages for survival in Gaza, that about half of Israelis are prepared to make that deal with the devil.
Now, I will encourage everyone, even if you've never listened to the Commentary podcast before, to listen to today's edition, Friday's edition. It's a special edition about the decision taken by the Israeli Security Cabinet overnight to take Gaza City. It is a remarkably textured and in-depth discussion between the whole gang, all five of them, the five commentary podcasters, led by John Podhoretz, of course, but Abe is there, and Christine is there, and Seth is there, and, of course, Matt. If you've never listened to it before and you're only going to listen to it once, listen to today's episode. I'm coming back with the break, after the break with Matt. During the break, though, I'm going to talk with him about Putin and Trump. And then after the break, we're going to talk about Rahm Emanuel and Bibi. So don't go anywhere. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show. I am back with Matt Continetti. During the break, it'll be over at YouTube and, of course, on the Big Weekend Pod. Matt, we'll go back to Israel when we go back on the network, but I wanted to ask you, it's all speculative. We don't even know if there's going to be a meeting between Trump and Putin. Are you afraid of that? Do you think it's a good idea? Your thoughts?
Well, I think the meeting will be a good idea if we get a good result. And usually in these types of meetings, you have the result going in. People know what the different parties are going to agree to. In this case, I think going in knowing that some type of ceasefire would emerge from the meeting between Trump and Putin, that would justify the meeting. Now, I also know that President Trump likes meeting people, and he's prepared to go and meet people like, say, Kim Jong-un and talk and try to persuade that person through his charisma. But if the other party, like we saw in Trump 1 with Kim Jong-un, isn't willing to make concessions, then Trump will walk away. But I think here, given the circumstances, walking away would be rewarding Putin with the meeting and with no result to show for it. So my personal preference, Hugh, would be that Trump tomorrow announces a pretty strong suite of penalties on Russia for not agreeing to his ceasefire proposal by the deadline, which is today, August 8th, is the deadline that Trump himself imposed. And if you have that leverage on Putin, then yes, I could see a potential meeting going in. But to give a meeting with no penalties and no pressure, with uncertain reward, I don't think is a very good strategic step.
I like that approach because it does not end up with Putin rewarded. Interesting side note, Richard Nixon wrote in the 1980 book, The Real War, never go to the summit unless you know what's at the top. Well, Reagan went to Reykjavik and didn't know, he left, and Trump went to Vietnam and didn't know what was going on, didn't like what was going on, and he left. You also got to be able to leave if you don't know what's up there. And I think Trump will leave and he won't be back. Do you expect he will go back to see Putin again if this goes south?
I never say never with Trump, Hugh, but I agree with you that he would leave if he doesn't get what he wants from Putin. He'd be certainly able to do that. You know, right now we're in a position where we've exacted some cost on Putin. I think Putin was a little bit surprised when Donald Trump got the NATO countries to agree to 5% of GDP on defense. When Donald Trump made the agreement that NATO countries would buy weapons from us and then would hand the weapons to Ukraine. And then not only the threat of additional sanctions on Russia, but what Donald Trump has done in the past 2 weeks by levying additional tariffs on India because of India's continued importation of Russian oil. I think that also gets Putin's attention. So now that we have his attention, we impose some costs, and that gives us leverage going into any meeting. No leverage.
I hope you are right. And Turkey is the next country up on the terms of who imports Russian oil. China's number one. We're not going to do secondary sanctions on China. Scott Bessent said that last night on Special Report. But Turkey, perhaps. We'll be right back on the network with Matt Continetti. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt with Matt Continetti on our Friday Roundup. We continue to focus on Israel. Matt, it's sort of extraordinary. This is the most important story of the year. This is a very pivotal war. The Middle East has been remade. Iran has been humbled, Hezbollah destroyed, but there are still this hostages situation in Gaza and the remnant. Yesterday, I sat down with Rahm Emanuel for an hour to talk with the likely candidate for the Democratic nominee in 2028. Here's what Rahm Emanuel said about Bibi while also defending strong relations with Israel and weapons sale to it. Cut number 4.
I will try to control myself here because I think the prime minister, if you look at historically, and we have a He called me. We have a long history going back to '09 when he called me publicly as when I was President Obama's chief of staff, a self-hating Jew, publicly. He
So
has
you get
failed.
along.
Yeah, right. He has failed miserably in the responsibilities of thinking through politically and strategically the opportunities that Israel has achieved militarily. Look, my middle name is Israel. My father fought in the air gun, fought in the War of Independence. Never has Israel been more secure militarily from the days when Ben Gurion led the Horror at Dizengoff Circle when they were declared a state. They're incredibly secure strategically, militarily, and they're unbelievably politically and internationally more vulnerable than they've ever been. And it's on the doorstep of this prime minister because he refuses to make the tough political decisions because of his own sense of being held hostage by a cabinet that is divorced from political and strategic reality. The Israeli Defense Force has done an.
So, Matt, what do you think of that criticism of Bibi Netanyahu?
Well, I think it's a very typical criticism. I think it's shared by the center left in Israel and in the United States. I think it's also a convenient way for Democrats who want to still be known as pro-Israel to criticize Israel by focusing
Yes.
on Prime Minister
Yes.
Netanyahu. And so this is a convenient position for Rahm Emanuel, but it is widely shared. And look, I don't think that Bibi Netanyahu is perfect by any means, and I think that historians will look back and see, well, how much did this concepcia, this idea that basically you could leave Hamas and Gaza on its own and every so often engage in a limited conflict to eliminate its rocket supply, how much did that concepcia lead to October 7th, right? But at this moment, I think that Netanyahu's leadership has been inspired to think that on October 7th, 2023, Israel was surrounded by a ring of fire, that from Gaza to Lebanon to Syria to Iraq to Iran to Yemen. And now, because of the actions that Netanyahu has taken, and in the past few months in particular, the actions he's taken with President Trump, the ring of fire is almost completely extinguished. There's
Well,
one big
this is my
blaze.
view.
Hmm.
He's a flawed but inspiring leader. He's not unlike every other wartime leader. Churchill was behind the Norway expedition, which was a terrible thing in World War II. He backed the invasion of Greece or the defense of Greece. Big mistake. He made mistake
Gallipoli.
after mistake.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, but great leaders have flaws. I think Netanyahu will be remembered by history as the man who took out Iran with a nuclear threat. Number one, just that's it. And everything else is a footnote. Let me ask you now about something else I talked about with Emmanuel, and I'll play it next hour. I hope you have a chance to read the transcript or listen to it because he is looking for the Clinton lane and the Carter lane. He defended the redistricting denunciation of Texas, and he defended the Texas Democrats fleeing to Chicago. What's your take on that, Matt Continetti?
Well, I think it's hypocrisy of the highest order for the Texas Democrats to say that they're protecting democracy by skimping out on a vote, taking a private jet to Illinois, which is one of the most heavily gerrymandered states in the country, and then dining on, Governor Pritzker's tab is the height of hypocrisy. And it's I think another sign of Democratic dysfunction, Hugh, because what we've seen now is Democrats revive this argument that somehow Republicans are a threat to democracy. This is not an argument that has worked in the past. Voters don't care because they know that Republicans aren't a threat to democracy. Republicans in Texas are doing exactly what every legislature does when they see an opportunity, which is they do a gerrymander, they do redistricting to give them a leg up. Same thing happened 20 years ago in Texas when Tom DeLay in Washington worked with Texas Republicans to have a mid-district, mid-decade redistricting. Democrats fled then. They're fleeing now. They'll be back. and the gerrymander will get done.
What I argue with Rahm is that, look, we're in late Roman Republic times when it comes to upping the ante. And I go back to Teddy Kennedy's attack on Bork, the blockade of all judicial nominees under George W. Bush, the ending of the filibuster by the nuclear option by Harry Reid. And so politics is coming down to brass tacks in red and blue, and we're self-selecting out into different states. But it's not, you can't call a flag on another, provided it's constitutional. Either party can do whatever it wants to do. And that's where my limit is. Is that where your limit is, Matt? If it's constitutional, go right ahead.
Sure, it's constitutional. Everybody does it. Gavin Newsom does it. Why can't Texas Republicans do it? And by the way, talk about changing the rules. We have James Carville giving interviews now saying that, well, next time Democrats are in power, they have to make the District of Columbia a state, they have to make Puerto Rico a state, and they have to expand the Supreme Court to 13 seats. So that, to me, is a far more direct threat to American democracy than the Texas legislature redrawing the maps to pick up a few seats in the next election.
Well, the last one is the end of the rule of law. The moment you expand the Supreme Court, that is the end of the rule of law. I have one more segment coming up with Matt Continetti, and we're going to talk about the Democrats positioning themselves for 2028, because Rahm has kicked it off with interviews with Megyn Kelly, Amy Walters, and me in 2 weeks. So that tells you a little bit something about his ambitions. But he's not alone. There are other Democrats who are out there getting organized, getting ready to run, and Matt Continetti will run through who he thinks is most formidable when we come back. And after the break, I'll be right back. Stay tuned. I'm Hugh Hewitt. So I'm back with a final segment with Matt Continetti. Matt, Rahm Emanuel is arguably the most qualified Democrat. He's been chief of staff in the White House, political director for a different president, ambassador to Japan, congressman. But the lane he wants is the lane that Clinton ran in and that Jimmy Carter ran in, a moderate Democrat of the Scoop Jackson variety. Does that lane exist anymore?
No, there is no Clinton lane left in the Democratic Party. All the polling shows that Democrats have moved toward self-identified progressivism. More Democrats say they're very liberal than I think more say that they're conservative. I mean, it's a single digit of self-identified conservative Democrat. I don't think there's a Clinton or Carter lane left in the Democratic Party. I also think a problem for Emanuel, Hugh, is he's an operative. You know, sure, he was the mayor of Chicago. He served in Congress, but he's never won statewide. He's never been a governor. And going from that type of background strategy, alderman type politics to the presidency has always been a very tough road. And I expect he'll have the same tough road 2 years from now.
I was impressed by his grasp of national security affairs. Wasn't up to date on the triad, but he was up to date on the Navy, and he was up to date on China, and it was a very impressive interview. Okay, last question, Matt Continetti. Who is the front runner among the Democrats in 2028?
I think Gavin Newsom is the front runner for the Democrats right now. Two-term governor, has California, the most important state for the Democratic Party. He's picked these policy fights with Trump. I mean, he's on the wrong side of the policy, but he still is a fighter, and that's what the Democratic base wants. He'll have access to money. The question is, will he actually make the plunge and run?
You know, Matt, I spent 27 years in California between the Reagan years and coming back to the Beltway. It's a mess. It's a disaster. If Gavin runs, the rest of the country ain't buying it. Matt Continetti, thank you. Follow Matt on X at Continetti. And again, if you haven't already done it, listen to today's commentary podcast, because it really does cover the Israel gambit in Gaza with more depth and detail than anyone else has. Thank you, Matt. I'll be right back.